Hey friends, thanks again for tuning into my channel. So this video is going to be about a lunar astrology. This is going to be a part of this lunar astrology series that I'll be uploading videos for. And I already uploaded a video on the first phase within the 8 phase relationships in relation to astrology. And so the first phase was the new phase. And so we'll briefly reflect on that, but this video is primarily going to be talking about the crescent phase. And so that begins at 45 degrees. It's from 45 to 90 degrees. And then there are small little minor aspects within this degree period or this, the degree range. So we'll go over all of those things. So I just want to show you this image. This image I got in my evolutionary astrology courses that I took a couple months ago. And so here, I love this image because it just gives you this idea of, all the phases, the 8 phases. And here in the middle, you see the yin and the yang. So these phases are expressed as, they are expressed in different energies. So basically, in the duality sense of passive and active, which, you have yin yang, passive, active, return, separation. Also, you can look at it as feminine and masculine, but I really like to stay within the active and passive. So yang would be active, which made sense when we talked about the new phase and the instinctual emergence. It's just like, boom, I'm here, I exist. Which, the new phase or that 0 degree mark on the actual astrology chart is Aries energy. So it's just that instinctual emergence. And then what we'll be talking about is the struggle, the crescent phase. And so that is more expressed, more from a yin perspective, from an internal passive perspective. So we'll get into all that, but I just wanted to show you guys, I thought it was really, really cool, this image. So you start with new, instinctual emergence, into struggle, crisis in action, self-analysis, all the way till, that balsamic phase of, completion and oneness and, really bringing things together with the spirit and ideals. And so you can see also you have these little degrees within. So you have the semi-square, semi-sextile, sextile, septile. These are all the minor aspects. And so this is a great way for you to learn the aspects when looking at the relationship between 2 planets. And so when I go through these different phases, this will give you an idea. If you look at, I think I put in the previous video, I mentioned the Mars and Venus relationship, like if we're going to use that as an example. And so we'll use it as an example in this video as well with the next phase. But it's going to be the Mars and Venus is that initiating phase. That's that instinctual emergence. Like there's, this new intent or this new belief or this new relationship or new cycle within the, Mars and Venus. It's, instinctive action or inspired action or just, that conscious desire. And then you have Venus, which is the relationships and values and listening and things of that nature. So when you're going to be looking at Mars and Venus relationship in your chart, that's the main, I guess that's the connection between the 2 planets. And if it's in conjunct, then your action and your relationships are, starting when you were born, it's starting a new cycle of, of really understanding desires within relationships, all relationships. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So I just wanted to show you this chart. And so really quickly, let's review the phase relationship of the new, new moon, or just like the new phase is what I would call it. And so we talked about this in the previous video, but the first phase would be the new instinctual emergence, which I just described, which is from 0 to 45 degrees. It's yang energy, so it's an outward expression, it's active, it is a point of separation. And so with this new phase, there's going to be a brand new evolutionary intention initiated in the relationship between any two planets. So when you're looking at your chart, like I said, with Mars and Venus, there's this initiation of a new cycle if they're in a new phase relationship. When you're born, your soul has this intent to evolve by starting a new cycle of learning about desires, conscious desires within relationships and instinctual actions within relationships. And so with this new phase, there's this need for diversity of experience. So, as you're creating this new belief, or you're wanting to really start a new cycle, it makes sense for, you to have different experiences in different relationships. So, that's why to me I don't believe that every relationship should look the same. There's no one right relationship. Maybe some people are single all of their lives and there's a reason for that, or like prefer being single. Or then also there is this element of some people, they just always in relationships, and it just tends to happen that way, and it happens so easily for these people. And so that's going to be expressed or experienced within that new phase relationship. So there's going to be this desire to explore multiple relationships. And if it's not even a relationship thing, if it's just like depending on whatever two planets you're looking at, even if it's like ideas or creativity, creating things, there's going to be this desire to dip your toes in many different things. Or I probably didn't say that right, but there's going to be this desire to just experience many different perspectives. And so you have the action aspect of the new phase, which is, the instinctual action, and then your projection, or the opposite of you, or the opposite sign, or the opposite relationship would be that reaction. So you're going to do things, and then it's like paying attention to the environment around you and your relationships in order to like gain knowledge of, is this right or wrong, or is this serving me or not serving me? Am I hurting people, or, whatever it is. It's like you're acting first and then you get the reaction after. And so also there's a desire to break from the past, break free from the past. So you saw in that chart that this new phase starts at 0 degrees. It's that conjunction point. And so there's, that's initially the ascendant, or Aries. And so it's at that threshold where, Pisces was a sign before it. And like, Pisces is technically the end of the cycle, or the 12th house is like technically the end of the cycle. So you're crossing over to Aries, which is the first sign, which is the first house. So it's starting this new cycle. So you're making a desire to break free from the past and what came before. I want to talk about the Crescent phase here. And so this phase is considered to be the struggle. So it is a 45 to 90 degree mark. That's kind of like that window of the Crescent phase. And then you have these minor aspects within the Crescent phase. And they're like really important, like the septile, the sextile, quintile, and the square. These all are important markers. They're like different things, different little minor shifts, I would say, or interactions. And so that 45 degree mark would be considered or known as the semi-square. So this is when you're shifting from yang to yin. And the most important theme, or the most important archetype of this phase is like, or the most important experience is going to be the struggle. So it is the struggle to integrate whatever was new. So when we started this new cycle, if you think about just like an evolutionary process with a belief system or a relationship or whatever it is, and so you're stepping out of your comfort zone by taking this instinctive action, or instinctual emergence, or this new beginning. And so you're really excited, you're pumped, you're just doing all the things, like everything's amazing, you have all these great ideas. And then obviously you begin to get the reactions from your outside environment, or even from your body, like maybe you're doing way too much, or, maybe things are feeling a little off, and it's like, like it's not your comfort zone. So it's more so like, I like to look at also the new phase, or Aries, as, instinctive action. Like it's your instincts. So it's just what you do without even thinking about it. And so it's like, if you're someone who, and especially depending on your rising sign, if you're someone who, is really in touch with their intuition and leads by their intuition, then, you will make moves based on that. And then at some point, your mind or the ego will catch up with what you did. And it's kind of like that reality check in a sense of like, what are you doing? Is this serving you? And sometimes it could be your ego, freaking out. Or sometimes there are messages, and there are signs that it's like, okay, you need to pay attention to this. You made this move, you took this leap of faith, and now look at this, So this part, this crescent phase is really, it's a point of integration. So there's a huge push at this point, especially at the 45 to 46 degree, that's that initial shift from yang energy to yin. So it's that active energy. We're shifting from the active to the passive. So it's like all this like expression and energy moving outward. And then all of a sudden you get to this 45 degree mark and there is, this push, this force, that it's like this feeling to internalize everything. It's like, wait, I need to go within, breathe, and step out or step within myself, I guess you could even say, and like look at the bigger picture, and like, where am I going? What am I doing? So, you are at this point where you're at a crossroads of, am I, like usually at this 45, the semi-square, the square is like that crisis in action. But with the crescent in this 45 degree semi-square, there is this element of struggle because it's like you're at that crossroads of like, am I going to fall back into my comfort zone or am I going to just keep moving forward? This is when things begin to get uncomfortable, especially when your ego comes in. So, just keep your eyes and your keep all your senses like open and clear, because at this 51 degree mark, which is that septile relationship, you can start to get sporadic or clear information, just like these little like sparks of info. And the internal level of realization, this is what move you're going to make next, is like really internalizing what actions, what desires you have, like what's working, what's not working, and coming to that clarity and that realization of, okay, like I feel good doing this. I know that it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to keep moving forward. But, for a lot of us, the comfort zone is like, it's the comfort zone. So there's going to be, this strong desire to, just be in that zone or to move forward in your desires. And so as we move through this phase, when you're at the 60 degree mark, which is a sextile, there is this opportunity to really act upon, like something, you might get this like slight, the sextile is a harmonious aspect. And so there might be something going on or some shift or just like some opportunity or someone says something to you or you read something, but it's like this spark of recognition within your higher, like from your higher self or of your higher self. And this realization of like, oh yes, I'm able to recognize my past desires and understand like what's coming through in that regard. But then I have this awareness of how my desires are manifesting themselves as well. So it's like something shifts and you get that click of like a recognition of, how, things are coming through unconsciously and how that really affects how you do things. And so as we move forward, this is really transmuted into creative transformation. And so if you're able to really stick with, with your desires and like work through your comfort zone and really make that intention of manifesting what it is that you want to do or want to do differently, then this is the fun part. This quintile aspect at 72 degrees will help us, this energy working with that will help us integrate and creatively express our new desires. It's like really understanding and getting clarity from a creative perspective. And it's like, okay, like I had this really hard time, this frustrating time, this struggle of like wanting to stay in my comfort zone, or if I'm going to keep pushing forward because, you have the highs and lows of life. and you realize how your past desires are influencing you. And then the key to moving forward is to really integrate that and like express it creatively. So how can I release a lot of this, whatever it was, the struggle, or how can I like release my desires, in a creative way, or just whatever it is that I learn, and how can I share this with others? And so there's this clarity in your desires. And so finally, at the end of this phase is that 90-degree mark where you move into this crisis in action. So it's like, I love this because you get to see like the lows and the highs, and just like the spiral of life within each, segment. And so with the 90 degrees, just starting out with the 45 degree, and you're going from the semi-square where you do have this small occurrence that will push you into really integrating and going within, and then you have these different waves of realization and awareness, and then you come around to that 90-degree mark, and it's just when everything's great and everything's awesome, boom, crisis in action. Even stronger frustration and this desire to just express and explode and just bust out, this is that crisis in action. So it's like there you have to make a move on something, right? So you having all this time of internalizing and integrating and being passive. And so then you get to that 90-degree mark where there's another shift in energy. So there's a shift from yin to yang. And so this is a moment of when you finally meet that past desire, that fear, or that, whatever it was that was underneath the surface. This is when it really comes up, because it's like you're doing the work. You're aware of it. You're bringing forth these new desires. But in order to bring forth and integrate new desires in, ways of being and, different levels of consciousness, you have to also release things that are no longer serving. That's just alchemy. Like you have to release in order to bring in more energy. It's like having this constant flow. And so there may be a sacrifice, there might be some things like really uncomfortable things that you have to do in order to keep moving forward. But this is a point where you have to make a choice on cutting the cord, releasing what's not serving you, and moving forward, or you're just going to repeat the same cycle and then just fall back and then fall into the new cycle again, trying the new desire, and then coming up against this until you're really able to break through this crisis in action. So one example of a crescent phase relationship would be, we'll build off of the Mars and Venus relationship. So in the previous video, I think I talked about how if you're looking at Mars and Venus in your chart, this is, you can think of it as your soul has this intent to really establish new conscious desires within a relationship, Mars, and then Venus is the relationship aspect. So what are these new desires? Also, what are the new values? Because values is represented by Venus. So am I going to listen more in my next relationship? Am I going to try to have balance and, avoid codependency? Like, what are your intentions? And this is like, if you see in your chart that your Mars and Venus are conjunct, or, that's an example of how that new phase is expressed. It's just like your soul is here to, really learn new things about relationships and, also just experience different relationships to really understand what's important to you. What are your values? What are your desires? So then taking that to the next phase would be the crescent phase. And so the crescent phase is, at that point of the 45-degree mark and you're in the semi-square, okay, you're in a relationship now, you have this amazing person. So how is that working for you? And so I feel like at the 45-degree mark is going to be when the influences or the energies or suppressed energies from the past in regard to like maybe not listening to your partner or jealousy or not really knowing what your values are, like you'll start to feel those feelings coming forth, which will trigger, some type of struggle and it's just like, am I going to fall back on my old patterns of getting really upset and really frustrated and like closing myself off and not wanting to communicate and not wanting to listen to my partner? Or this is that crossroads of the past or the future, and deciding if you want to, just like really sit with and internalize and figure out what needs to be released or what's coming up. This is that inner work that's associated with trauma when you're really working on, new belief system and new ways of being or new levels of consciousness. So it's going to be with that Mars and the Venus. It's like, okay, actually, I'm going to really sit with myself, meditate. This is when you start to get those insights. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to communicate with my partner how I actually feel. And so this is that crescent phase mark. And so you're going through this, right? And so that was that small interaction. And then there's going to be one more big trigger, and that's going to be around the 90-degree mark of the square where, your whatever it is that you're working with is really going to come up. So it's like you're starting, and as you're doing the inner work, you're starting to like slowly bring it up until it gets to that, from that 45-degree to the 90-degree window, and it makes its way to the 90-degree, and then it's like boom, it wants to just be released. And so if you're really struggling to, like, if you're not doing the work, then it's going to be like a crisis in action. That's when shit just happens because it needs to be, like let go. Or, if you are doing the work, then you'll have that really intense experience, but it won't be as intense as if you were working against it. So that's the way you would look at the Mars and the Venus relationship if they're at like in a semi-square, between that semi-square and the actual square, which I'll be doing my next video on that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment on this video. If you guys aren't following me on Instagram, that's where I do like a lot of my just astrology stuff. I do all my videos here. Obviously it's YouTube, but I do like little random, like whatever comes to mind, I put that on Instagram. So definitely follow me, Urania_universe, if you're interested in booking a reading or learning astrology. You can check out my website, www.uraniauniverse.com. Also, yeah, I guess that's it. So definitely just reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want to connect on learning astrology. Take care, guys.